Hello there. Right, just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who's watched the video in the last week. That's really, truly humbling. Thank you. And to everyone that's left some amazing comments and the people who've subscribed and all of that. Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, everyone who's gone and shared this video out there. So I just wanted to start really with a brief sort of explanation for the strategy that I sort of delivered in the previous video. Just to say that it's obviously not a totally black and white issue, but it does at least allow us a logical basis, a logical point from which to argue from. It's not about picking a side then, it's about just demanding the truth. And obviously I'm on the side of truth, I'd like to think, but again, both sides seem to feel like their truth is the only one that matters. So for me, I've been down the rabbit hole, as it were, for 15 years or more, and it's led me to some very dark places, and it's not always healthy. So my object at the moment of recent times has been to try and take myself out of it to an extent, to remove myself from a layer and try and get what the Americans term as that 40,000 foot view, that sort of bigger picture, and try and see what the landscape looks like and the wider implications and options available to us. And it's sort of, a lot of the talk at the minute is about the kind of art of war appearing weak when you're strong, and all of that basis. I've kind of been toying with the idea of calling it playing the Sheeple card in a way, not appealing to the leaders necessarily, but saying like, look, we have these two conflicting narratives and we demand a debate to settle this, rather than expressly choosing one side over the other. But just to remember, yeah, we are many, they are few. We do have the power here, but it's how we go about it and recognising what options have been left available to us. So yeah, cards on the table. I am against lockdowns. I'm not necessarily in denial of the virus. There does seem to have been a spike in the deaths last April, which would be indicative of a new virus of some sort, but beyond being an aggressive flu type, I'm not entirely sure. No one is at the moment. But so yeah, I'm not necessarily in denial of the virus, but I am against an apparent false narrative, and also the current definition that's being used for the vaccine and the ingredients. But nevertheless, everyone is surely aware that these alternative arguments are out there and exist. And the conspiracy theories, and again, it's very convenient that they tack on theory all of the time with conspiracy. I mean, history tells us that conspiracies have happened and will happen. So to dismiss all of them as being mere theories without entering into a debate to try and find the veracity of such claims is kind of it's a non-starter, really, isn't it? But yeah, in a society that espouses that diversity is a strength, the only diversity that now seems forbidden is that of opinion. And diversity, remember, is division. It's the opposite of unity. And the only way that we can achieve genuine unity is through proper debate, scrutiny and vigilance in a public discourse in order to reach a genuine consensus, not just a mob rule consensus of we have the most voices, therefore we win. It needs to be done openly, otherwise we will remain divided. And until such time we are divided and will fall. So yeah, are agents of division using this in an information war to undermine us? Now, I want to talk about war and the broader implications of that in another video, I think, because it's just too wide-ranging a topic for the moment to fully get into. But obviously we are facing an invisible enemy of some sort. Obviously parts of it are fairly visible to those who are awake. Yeah, I think that needs to be covered in a separate video, so we'll talk about that at another point. But I did send the previous video to various other platforms, and to different outlets, and linked it in comments and things. I have seen a few of my comments being just arbitrarily removed, even though, as far as I can tell, they're not in breach of any community guidelines. And also, the way I'm having to word this is it is an act of self-censorship. I'm having to apply caveats and things like that because I don't expressly want to assert that what I'm saying is 100% gospel, but merely to raise the question that we just don't know where we stand until we have these debates. But obviously there was no real take-up or response, despite being promised some from certain outlets. I'm not surprised, but I did kind of hope that someone would have seen the potential in the more basic approach that I'd kind of come to the conclusion of the last option remaining to us in a way. But no, they still plug away with their facts and their figures in long format videos, which I'm finding increasingly difficult to digest nowadays. I can't sit through multiple hours and hours of in-depth... I mean, this is the thing. These people take it upon themselves to almost have the debate with the other side, but all on their own, because they're not being met halfway in this discussion, as it were. Or they throw shade and ridicule on the MSM and highlight the hypocrisy and go about debunking articles and things, and rightly so. I mean, this needs to be put out there if what we're being told by the establishment isn't the truth. But it fails to try and fight back beyond this version of kind of contrarianism. This is easily ignored by the establishment as just theories, and they can, by not entertaining the discussion at all, try and keep it sidelined, and in a way just allow it to be ridiculed and dismissed. And it plays right into their hands in this aspect by just constantly contradicting the narrative or trying to assert your own, rather than calling for a wider sort of debate and pushback on this. And all this does really is force people to pick a side. So this strategy, whilst I have clearly got a side that I'm on, it allows me to not pick a side. And it's my attempt to allow concerned people on both sides of the debate to call out the lack of public discourse on such matters, and hopefully give us a means of pushing for the truth or societal direction that so many of us at the moment want or need. I mean, I'm fairly sure this debate won't happen, and many of us know why. But by my serving notice in this way, it allows us an out. It allows us a position that even if the policies may be tiptoeing in the right direction for us, we can say, I don't consent and I gave notice. And I think potentially emailing your local MP would potentially suffice. I think that's what I'm going to consider doing, is writing that up into some form of formal email or structure, some form of formal letter to them, and linking in that video as well to kind of explain my position. We need to end this division. So how do we find common ground between us and start healing some of these divisions? Again, we need the kind of 40,000 foot perspective on this. We need to be able to see that there are priorities that need to be addressed. Certain aspects need addressing before others can be. The most important of those for me is the current societal changes that we've been witnessing, but it's been going on for decades as far as I can see. I mean, you could call this Agenda 2030, you could call this the Great Reset, we could call it the New Normal or the New World Order, or any other myriad of terms, the totalitarian tiptoe, the Long March, all of that sort of aspect. We need to recognise that this is primarily being implemented through the agenda or the play of order out of chaos, i.e. problem, reaction, solution. To break it down to a greater extent, certainly in reference to the sort of Long March, it's demoralisation, destabilisation, crisis, and then normalisation. And I think we're very much reaching the point where we're at the crisis stage and it's trying to be normalised. The thing that happens and has happened throughout history is, with the problem, reaction, solution, if people don't buy into the first two enough, the solution is usually universally implemented through force, and that's when the mask slips and the establishment generally loses control. So we need to recognise that these divisive elements are responsible for most, or some if not most, of this chaos, and recognising that the order that appears to be being implemented is one of a technocratic or authoritarian and maybe communist socialist structure. At the very least, it does appear to be a power grab, but again, more on that another time. We don't want to get too sucked into that right now. It's also recognising that the communist and socialist political regimes were directly attributable for at least 100 million deaths in the 20th century alone. And I think that's a conservative estimate from some of the sources I've been reading online in reference to that. It's also about recognising that both the left and the right in this debate are both sort of fearing the same thing in a way. They're both they're both trying to destroy the system and bring about their own vision of a utopian kind of future, but they're also fearful of living in one of these dystopian nightmares and readily accuse the other side of enacting it or doing so. So can we all agree now, please, that none of us want to live under a Hitler or a Mao or a Stalin or any other one of these tyrants? Nobody wants to live under a tyrannical dictator, no matter what the political persuasion of the regime. And that brings us neatly back onto government, which again, if we break it down, the etymology of it in Latin, govern, control, meant mind. Now, being very, very charitable here, one of the potential interpretations of that would be those who are of a mind to control. But it could also be that those who have a mind to control. Whose mind? Our minds, potentially. So that's where we have this newer idea that's been floated around, particularly among the conspiracy community, that it is a form of mind control. And I certainly would happen to agree with that, in my opinion, at the moment. That does seem to be where this is heading. And also to make the distinction that a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking Parliament is the same as government. It's not. They're very different entities. Parliament can only inform government on the publics, the electorates, their representatives. So what the constituents that they represent want the direction of the government to take. But the government is still, in theory, freely within its will to do so or not. Certainly when they've put us on an emergency wartime footing and such like. But we've had effectively 11 years of Tory rule, who are supposedly conservative and right-wing. But the policy keeps creeping towards the liberal and the left-wing. So it doesn't really make sense in that argument. And what we have now with the relentless bias and the propaganda, the censorship, the general lack of integrity from the establishment in its many forms, it seems to be more about the law of rules rather than the rule of law. And they appear to be using mob rule to do so. Now, I would remind you that in 2015, as part of the Domestic Violence Acts that were reformed and the laws were put in place, that any form of coercive or controlling behaviour is illegal. And certainly with the propaganda that we've seen at the minute, I mean, what's the latest attempt? Act like you have it? Come on. Act like you have it. It's absolutely mindless. It's very, very dangerous, and it's a form of gaslighting, as someone else pointed out in the comments, so thank you for that. But yeah, act like you have it, and look someone in the eye and tell them that you haven't been a naughty boy kind of aspect of things. It's treating us very, very disrespectfully and assuming that we don't have the intellectual capacity to see through the manipulation that's going on there. But I think one of the aspects that we need to address in this that has caused quite a lot of impotence, really, in terms of people being able to forcefully push back, is this idea that, never ascribe to malice what can simply be attributed to incompetence. I think we need to get rid of this idea of incompetence over malice, because although you could say, the government, the Prime Minister, whoever it may be, they're puppets, they're not in charge of things. Well, then who is? The government are. These people are, as you say, representatives. They're puppets. They are told what to do and how to do it and when to do it by the people pulling the strings, the man behind the curtain. But certainly the plays that have been enacted over the last year have made it very, very clear to a vast number of people that this does appear to be malicious, even though they'll emotionally charge things with talking about deaths and loss of life and protecting the vulnerable and all that sort of side of things, which is all very laudable. Of course we want to do that. But at the same time, it puts people emotionally on the back foot and unable to then confidently defend their position when they're trying to contradict the narrative in that sense. So again, that's why by calling out this division, we're able to stand ourselves away from that and ask for a greater degree of scrutiny and truth to come forward. Or if not, it allows us the position to say, we don't consent and we're going our own way, thank you very much. So for me, this lack of willingness for scrutiny or accountability on behalf of the establishment and the division that has caused is the elephant in the room that must be addressed first before we can start picking up any of the other pieces. So there we are. That's just my opinion on such matters, and I hope it's a good place to start from. But next time you find yourself getting angry or fearful or depressed at what you're seeing in the news, the media, on the web, think about it. The web, trapped in a web. I mean, there's all of these sort of metaphors being floated around at the minute. But next time you feel yourself getting riled up about something or very indignant or feeling like, oh, I want to go out and do something crazy, like, just think, stop and think, is that just how they want me to feel? Is that the mind control? Is that part of this divisive agenda? Divide and conquer. And until we can recognise that and address that, it's going to be very difficult for us to move forwards as a unified front that wants to seek the truth, no matter what that may lead to. But we need to have a genuine consensus, not this sort of mob rule scientific consensus that we're seeing, like what it used to be, where it was properly peer reviewed and scrutinised and backwards and forwards, and we came to a sensible decision. So anyway, I'm going to shut up now. So thank you very much for watching. Take care, everyone, and until the next time, peace.